Have you ever paid someone's bills only to be told you're a burden? I did. I paid my mom's medical expenses for 5 years, drove her to every appointment, skipped vacations, dates, and even job promotions, just to be there when she needed me most. And then, over dinner, right in front of the entire family, she smiled sweetly, raised her glass, and said, "She's always been a hopeless failure. Pathetic? Really? Can't even keep a man, let alone a career." Everyone laughed, except one person, my cousin, who had been live streaming the whole thing. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming match or a wine glass thrown across the table. It was quiet and calculated, because when someone strips you of dignity in public, you don't fight back with noise. You fight back with proof. If you've ever been labeled too sensitive, too weak, or never enough by someone who should have protected you, then this story will feel uncomfortably familiar. And if you've ever stayed silent to keep the peace, even while your self-worth crumbled behind your smile, you're not alone. In the next 30 minutes, I'll walk you through how I uncovered years of manipulation hiding under the mask of motherhood, the exact moment I stopped financing my own humiliation, and how I turned a live stream meant to shame me into something that set me free. There's a reason you're still listening. Maybe you've lived this, maybe you're still in it. But I promise, by the end of this story, you'll remember something powerful. You don't owe your silence to people who cash in on your guilt. I've always been the good daughter, the one who showed up, who called, who kept the family calendar, scheduled the doctor's appointments, and remembered to refill the prescriptions that everyone else forgot. I wasn't the loud one. I wasn't the charming one, but I was the one who held things together when they were falling apart. When my mom was diagnosed with chronic heart failure 5 years ago, I didn't hesitate. I moved back to our hometown, took a less demanding job, and quietly shouldered the weight: bills, transport, meal plans, insurance paperwork, all of her, and I didn't complain, because that's what love looks like, right? Except love was never a two-way street with my mother. She wasn't overtly cruel. She was something worse, performative. In public, she was the charming Southern woman with a wicked sense of humor. But behind closed doors, everything became transactional. If I brought groceries, she'd joke. What, couldn't afford anything fresh this time? If I helped organize her meds, she'd sigh. You always were better with pills than people. She framed her insults as playful, her judgments as concern, her guilt trips as motherly advice. And because no one else saw it, I began to wonder if I was imagining it. Gaslighting, they call it. I just thought it was parenting. My sister, Claire, had left the family years ago. No explanations, no Thanksgiving appearances, just gone. Now I understood why, but I stayed because I still believed I could earn her kindness. We lived in a 2-bedroom bungalow that I technically paid for. After her second hospitalization, I refinanced part of my retirement fund to cover her home nurse. She called it our house, but the name on the mortgage, mine. I never corrected her. That was my mistake. My cousin Erin was the only one in the family who saw through things. She was 10 years younger than me, sharp, awkwardly funny, and very online. When she visited, she always noticed the passive-aggressive digs. She'd whisper jokes behind her glass or roll her eyes during Mom's little jabs. She was the one who started filming family dinners for memory's sake. I never questioned it. It was Erin who uploaded that now infamous live stream, not as revenge, but because she thought no one would believe it otherwise. And she was right. Let me take you back to that night. It was a typical Sunday dinner: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, a room full of people trying too hard to be normal. I had just refilled Mom's water glass when she looked across the table and said, "It's a miracle she's even here tonight." I thought she'd finally locked herself in her apartment with her cats. Laughter. Not because it was funny, but because people laugh when they don't know what else to do. Then she kept going. Honestly, I thought she'd amount to something by now. But look, she's just floating. Pathetic. Really, I remember Erin lowering her phone slightly, her face frozen. I remember someone coughing awkwardly into their napkin, and I remember thinking, this is the moment. This is who she really is. You know how people say the room spins? It didn't. Everything actually got still. So still that I could hear the click of my cousin's phone camera. So still that the roast chicken smelled like bleach. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just smiled. Because something in me, something I didn't even know was awake, opened its eyes that night. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. That was the night I decided. I'm done financing her cruelty. Done apologizing for taking up space. Done explaining why I'm not married or why I didn't take the job in Boston. Done acting like I was lucky to be tolerated. No more. That was the last Sunday dinner I ever attended. The last time I let her call me anything but enough. But my mother had no idea what I had been planning behind the scenes, or how the internet would respond to the mask she thought she wore so well. I didn't say a word that night. I went home, changed into pajamas, sat on the edge of my bed and just stared at the wall. I wasn't shocked by what my mom had said. Not really. What cut deeper was how comfortable she was saying it in front of everyone. How natural it was to humiliate me. Like I wasn't even a person with ears, with a heart. Just some disposable utility who happened to be present. I thought the worst was over. But the real blow came the next morning, in the form of a phone notification. You're trending. That was Erin's message. 3 words. I had no idea what she meant until I opened the video. There I was, sitting silently at the table while my mom, glass in hand, performed. The full clip was just under 3 minutes. She called me a disappointment, a financial black hole, and of course, hopeless failure. At one point, she waved her fork in the air and laughed. She thinks she's helping me, but really, I've been carrying her since the day she was born. Erin hadn't intended for it to blow up. She had posted it on a private Facebook group for adult children of narcissistic parents, but someone reposted it on Reddit, and then TikTok, and then the rest was internet wildfire. Within 48 hours, the video had over 2 million views. Thousands of comments poured in. Some said, "This is why I went no contact." Others shared stories of being erased, belittled, broken down by the very people who should have built them up. People saw my pain, not just understood it, validated it. That was new. And then came the emails from distant relatives, former classmates, even coworkers I hadn't spoken to in years. They all said some version of the same thing. I had no idea you were going through that. Because why would they? I never told anyone. I had protected her image like it was my job. Turns out, I was the PR team for a person who never once defended me. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. My mom blamed me. She called me 3 times that Monday, then left a voicemail screaming that I had set her up. Humiliated the family and ruined her reputation, as if I had stood on that table and broadcast her bitterness to the world. She never asked if I was okay. She never once apologized. Instead, she warned me, if you don't fix this, don't bother coming back. That's when I made my final decision. I didn't fix it. I fixed me. That week, I opened a new checking account in a different bank, one only I had access to. I rerouted all my direct deposits, canceled the auto payments for her medical needs, called her insurance and made sure the new contact was her, not me. Then I pulled out a 5-year ledger I'd kept quietly in my closet. Every bill, every prescription, every dollar I spent on her care, over $67. I scanned every page, uploaded it to a drive titled, "What Love Cost Me." Not to weaponize, but to remind myself, you weren't crazy. You weren't dramatic. You were generous, and it was taken for granted. By Friday, I was packed. I left the house key in the mailbox. Not a note, not a goodbye, just gone. I moved into a studio apartment 10 miles away. It wasn't fancy, no garden, no guest room, no framed family portraits. But for the first time in years, it felt like mine. I slept through the night without waking up in panic. I left dishes in the sink, played music loudly in the morning, lit candles just because I liked the scent, not because they covered up cooking smells. It was quiet, and in that silence, I could hear something I hadn't heard in years, myself, but the story didn't end there, because 3 weeks later, I got a call from a local news station. They had seen the viral clip and wanted to do a story on emotional caretaking burnout. They asked if I'd speak. I almost said no. Then I remembered every woman in the comments section who said, "I feel seen. I thought I was the only one." So I said yes, not to shame my mother, but to set someone else free. That news segment, it aired during Sunday dinner. The same time my mother used to host the weekly gathering. The same time she had tried to break me down, except this time, she was watching me on screen. While I told the truth she thought would stay behind closed doors. I thought the storm had passed. I had moved out, cut financial ties, spoken publicly about my story in a calm, rational way. No names, no finger pointing, just facts. But people like my mother, they don't like losing control, especially not in public. 2 days after the news segment aired, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from her lawyer. Apparently, my mother was threatening to sue me for defamation and financial abandonment. She claimed I had lied about supporting her, and worse, that I had leveraged false accusations to destroy her public image. It was laughable, but also frightening, because even a false lawsuit can drain you. Emotionally, financially, legally. I stared at the envelope for 5 minutes before I opened it, and for the first time since this all began, I felt rage. Not the hot, impulsive kind, but the cold, clear kind that sharpens your vision and silences your fear. I was done playing small. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Denise, mid-50s, soft-spoken, and brilliant. The kind of woman who didn't flinch when I said, "My mother's trying to take me down because I stopped paying her bills." Denise simply raised an eyebrow and replied, "Then it's time we show her receipts." And show them we did. Over the next 2 weeks, Denise and I compiled everything. Bank statements, prescription logs, appointment summaries, Venmo screenshots, home care agency contracts, and, most damning of all, a notarized statement from her primary physician confirming I had been the primary contact and payer on record for 5 years. We also discovered something else. My mom had claimed me as a dependent on her taxes, even though I'd been the one paying her expenses. Fraud. Tiny, but enough. Before filing a counterclaim, Denise had me write a personal impact statement. She said it wasn't for court. It was for me. So I wrote 4 pages, typed. In it, I detailed the emotional erosion, how I had slowly stopped seeing myself as someone worthy of respect, how her constant sarcasm masked deeper, cutting control. How being helpful turned into being owned. And then I ended with a line that surprised even me. My silence was not consent. It was survival. And now that I've chosen my own voice, I will not apologize for using it. Meanwhile, the video kept circulating. But something else started happening. People began digging. Internet sleuths found her public Facebook posts bragging about her supportive daughter. They found Instagram photos of gifts I had given her, with captions like, "My sweet girl." Always so thoughtful. She had used my generosity as content, but denied it when the mask slipped. It was too late to hide now. 3 days before the court date, I received another letter, this one handwritten. From her, it read, "I never expected you to turn on me. Everything I did was for your own good. But if you really want to destroy me, go ahead. Just know you'll regret it." I folded the letter neatly, placed it in the same folder as her legal threat, and for the first time in my life, I didn't cry over something she wrote. I didn't even flinch. On the day of the hearing, she showed up in beige, hair perfectly styled, pearls around her neck, the image of composure, but her voice cracked when the judge asked, "Did your daughter pay for your medical care?" She tried to spin it, that I had offered, that she never asked, that I made it sound worse than it was. Denise didn't raise her voice. She simply opened the binder, tab by tab, page by page, Receipts, dates, proof, every lie unraveled in the courtroom air. The judge ruled in my favor, no defamation, no abandonment, and a warning to her attorney that pursuing further action would be considered frivolous litigation. My mother left without looking at me. She never said another word, but I didn't need her words anymore. As we walked out of the courtroom, a young woman stopped me in the hall. "I saw your video," she whispered. "It helped me leave my mom's house after 30 years. She hugged me, tight, like she needed to, and in that moment, I realized my fight wasn't just mine anymore. Have you ever been accused of betrayal, simply for choosing yourself? If so, stay with me, because what came next wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. You'd think after a court ruling, things would quiet down. They didn't, because even when you win, some people can't accept that you no longer need them. My mother didn't fight back with lawyers after the judge dismissed her case. She fought back with silence. No apology, no peace offering, just the cold war of absence. She blocked my number, removed every picture of me from her social media, told anyone who would listen that I had abandoned her in old age. But I wasn't trying to change her story anymore. I was writing mine, and for the first time in years, I had the energy to think about what I wanted. So I took a risk. I started a podcast, not one about trauma, not about my mom. It was about recovery, quiet victories, late bloomers, emotional boundaries, stories from people who spent their lives trying to earn love and finally walked away. At first, it was just me and a mic on the floor of my apartment closet, but within 6 months, I had 50 subscribers. People from all over the world writing in, saying, "Your story sounds like mine. I thought I was alone. Thank you for saying the things I was too afraid to." And then came the message that changed everything. It was from a local nonprofit that supports adult caregivers. They were launching a mental health initiative for daughters taking care of toxic parents. They wanted me to speak at their annual conference, not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of emotional justice. When I walked on stage that day, I wasn't the woman at the dinner table anymore. I wasn't her shadow, her disappointment, her verbal punching bag. I was someone who had taken the ugliest night of her life and turned it into a blueprint for others. I ended my talk with this. They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned silence is thicker than guilt. And sometimes your peace has to be louder than their pain. Standing ovation. And in that moment, I knew. The real justice wasn't in court. It wasn't in revenge. It was in being seen, on my terms. But the real twist, it came quietly. 3 months later, I received a manila envelope from a law office I didn't recognize. Inside was a short letter and a photocopy of my grandmother's will. Apparently, before she passed away, my grandmother had updated the will privately with a clause my mother never knew about. It stated, "To the grandchild who stays, even when it's hard, I leave the last piece of land I own. Use it for something kind." That land? It was a small, unused plot on the edge of town, overgrown, forgotten, but mine. And that's when it hit me. What if I used it to create something I never had? A place for daughters like me. A community center for women navigating caregiver burnout, emotional trauma, and rebuilding their identities. We called it the second voice, because sometimes your first voice gets buried in years of shame, fear, and silence. But the second one, that's the one you choose. My mom never acknowledged it. She drove past it once, I was told, but never called, never asked. And I didn't need her to, because the final win wasn't proving her wrong. It was proving to myself that I never needed to be right to be worthy. I just needed to stop handing the microphone to someone who never let me speak. A woman once told me, "You don't owe your story to the people who caused it, but you do owe your healing to the person living it, yourself." And that truth, that's the one I live by now. The funny thing is, I used to think healing looked like forgiveness. I thought one day my mother would call me, tell me she was proud, that she finally saw me. I thought if I just waited long enough, stayed quiet enough, helped hard enough. Maybe she'd soften. Maybe she'd change. But healing doesn't always come in the form of reconciliation. Sometimes it comes when you stop waiting for the apology that will never arrive and start giving yourself the closure you deserve. The center, the second voice, opened its doors on a cloudy Wednesday morning. There was no ribbon cutting, no camera crews, just coffee, warm chairs, soft light, quiet music. The first person through the door was a woman in her 60s. She sat down in the corner of the reading room, picked up a journal from the lending shelf, and wrote for 2 hours straight, without saying a word. Before she left, she placed the notebook back on the shelf with a yellow sticky note on top. First time I felt safe in a long time. Thank you. That note is still framed on my desk, because that is the victory, not revenge, not a courtroom win, not even going viral, but giving people a place to breathe again. I've had dozens of women tell me their stories since then. Some whisper them in person, some message me at 3 a.m. when they can't sleep, some cry through the entire thing, then apologize for being dramatic. And I always say the same thing. Your pain isn't too much. It's just finally being heard. One woman came in after finding the center online. She was 39, a teacher. Her mother had spent years telling her that being single was pathetic, that she'd end up alone with cats, that she was wasting her potential. Sound familiar? She walked into the garden, sat by the fountain, and asked me, "How do you get over needing them to love you?" I told her the truth. You don't, but you get better at loving yourself in the places they never touched. That's where the real healing lives, not in erasing the past, but in reclaiming what comes next. So, if you've ever been made to feel like you were too much or never enough, this story is for you. If you've ever been labeled a burden when all you did was try, this story is for you. And if you're still living in the shadow of someone else's cruelty, still second-guessing your worth, still waiting to be good enough to earn peace, let me say it plainly. You don't have to earn peace. You just have to choose it. And sometimes that choice looks like walking away and building something of your own. I don't speak to my mother anymore, but I no longer carry her voice in my head because mine finally got louder, stronger, clearer, rooted, not in bitterness, but in truth. Sometimes the people who raise us teach us what love isn't, so that one day, when we finally meet the real thing, we recognize it. And this life I've built, this quiet, beautiful, self-made peace, it's the real thing. If any part of this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between your dignity and their approval, if you've ever sat in silence, questioning whether your pain was even valid, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. You don't need to share your name. You just need to know you're not alone. And if this story made you feel seen, subscribe for more, because around here, we don't chase closure, we create it, and we do it together. In the next episode, my parents paid off only my sister's med school debt after promising to help us both, so I turned a surprise inheritance into a lesson they'd never forget. You won't want to miss that one.